Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Deploy Secure Apps with DigitalOcean for the MLH local host webinar by CodeChef VIT. I am Vishesh Bansal and I am a full stack developer for CodeChef VIT. And along with me today, I have Swarup Kharul, who is also a full stack developer at CodeChef VIT. During the course of this session, we will be introducing you to Fast API and and the basics of deployment. So initially, we'll be covering the basics of container deployment and what it is. Then we'll be moving on to Docker and how to create a container. This session will be a code along as well as an explanation for you all. After that, we'll be moving to DigitalOcean and explaining you what DigitalOcean is a platform and what all services does this offer to you. Then uh, after that, moving on, we'll be explaining what are the security aspects that one needs to keep in mind while deploying a web application. And towards the end, we'll be covering how to deploy your own secure web application. So I hand over the session to Swarup to start with the Fast API.
Thank you, Vishesh. Now we'll begin with our session. So first thing first, we'll learn the basics first. So what do you mean by deployment? Let's say you have made a web application in your local machine and you wanted to share with your friends or you wanted to publish on internet. How would you do it? So here comes the term deployment. In order to put your code live or in production, you need to deploy, or in simple terms, push your code on a hosting platform where your code is constantly kept running. So whenever you hit a URL, the associated server will show your website. And this process is called as deployment. So as you can see in the definition, web deployment is the process of deploying the code. It may be your HTML, CSS, JavaScript or any server-side code from source control or source artifacts to a hosting platform. The process of deployment has 4 basic steps. As you can see in this diagram, we first build a project locally, then we develop it, and then in the staging phase we test our application. If we find some bugs, we fix it, and then in the end we deploy a project or we put our project live. Alright, now that we have seen what deployment is, now let's see its types. There are many types of deployment we can use, but in this session we'll be using container deployment. Let's break the word container deployment. What is container? So our code can be in different languages. It may rely on any software, or it may install some packages from internet, or it may require some specific system requirements like memory size in order to run properly. So in containerization, containers hold all the figurative nuts and bolts needed to run a program. So instead of cooking in another person's kitchen, containers allow us to create our own kitchens on servers wherever we go. In simple terms, containers are a way to package your code and allow it to run on any machine. So containers are a method of building, packaging and deploying your software. By now you might have guessed the meaning of container deployment, which is deploying the container itself instead of deploying the code. So container deployment is the act of pushing or deploying containers to the target environment such as cloud or on-premises server. But you may be wondering, why can't we directly push our code? Why are we using containers? So when you develop an application, you require certain dependencies. You require some specific version of some software. You may require a particular OS or different configuration settings. So these requirements lead to a lot of complications while setting up the server. So to avoid all this, we make our container with all our specific requirements and then deploy this container. Now, in order to make a container, we need a specific platform. We can't use our own local machine to create a container, right? So we need a specific platform to create containers. So there are many platforms available to package your code, and one of them is Docker. So let's see what Docker is. Docker is a set of platform as a service products that use OS level virtualization to deliver software in packages called containers. So basically, Docker helps us to build, run and ship our applications. Let's say you have a Python application. Typically, if you want to run this application on another machine, you need to start with an operating system. Then we need to install Python. Then we need to copy all our files and then run the application. This is just the case for a simple program. What if you are working on a really complex application? you would end up with a complex release document that has to be precisely followed. This is where Docker comes to our rescue. We can write these instructions inside a Docker file and let Docker package our application. Why we are using Docker? Because Docker is the most widely used platform and it is also open source. Now let's see how Docker works. So before getting to know how it works, let us understand some basic terminologies associated with Docker. Docker images and Docker containers are the two essential things that we will come across while working with Docker. In simple terms, a Docker image is a template that contains the application and all the dependencies required to run that application on Docker. So Docker image contains everything that our application requires, which includes a cutdown OS, runtime environment, application files, third-party libraries, some modules, environment variables, etc. On the other hand, a Docker container is a local entity. In more precise terms, it is a running instance of a Docker image. So in Docker containerization, there are two specific files that define a software. So that define what software is required on a machine and what hardware is required to run the machine. And these two files are Dockerfile and YAML file. Dockerfile controls the runtime environment and installation of necessary packages to sufficiently run the code. YAML file controls the hardware and network security requirements for the application. Now how Docker works, again to our basic question. First we Dockerize a project by writing a Docker file. So here we write a Docker file. After we are done with writing Docker file, we build it and we get a Docker image. So after a Docker image is built, we give this image to Docker to start a container using this image. So what Docker does is Docker takes this image and runs it inside a container. Okay. So now we are done with the theoretical part. Now let's make a small web application and try deploying it. We'll be using FastAPI to make our simple web application. FastAPI is a modern, high-performance web framework which comes with tons of cool features like auto documentation based on OpenAPI and built-in serialization and validation library. FastAPI is can be written in Python, so it is very easy to understand, easy to code, and very straightforward. Okay, so now let's start making our web application. I'll stop my presentation. Okay. Now I have already written the Python file, but I'll explain each and every line so that you understand it. So the first line is from FastAPI, import FastAPI. So FastAPI is a Python class that provides all the functionalities of our APIs. And form we will be using for a parameter for post request. I will be explaining it later on. Now then we are importing CORS middleware. So middleware I will explain again after some time. After that we are writing app is equal to FastAPI. So here app variable will be an instance of class FastAPI. This will be the main point of interaction to create all our APIs. So again, now what we are doing is we are adding a middleware to our app. What is a middleware? Middleware is a function that works with every request before it is processed by any specific route. So whenever a route is triggered, a middleware is ran before the function returns some response. Okay, so in middleware we are adding CORS middleware. What is CORS? CORS is cross origin resource sharing. Again, what is origin? An origin is a combination of protocol which can be HTTP or HTTPS, a domain which can be localhost or mlh.io, or it can be codesapi.com, and port can be your port 80 or port 8000, etc. So what is CORS middleware? CORS middleware allows us to communicate between backend and frontend if they are in different origins. So let's say your front end is in codesapi.com and your backend is still in development, which is in your local host or in your local machine. So your origins are different, right? So in order to for both to communicate, we use the CORS middleware. Now we are allowing some specific origins to communicate, which is port 8000 localhost and again 8000 port. We are allowing some methods, which is get method and post method. Get method is generally triggered when you just click on any URL, and post method is generally used to send the data to backend. Allow headers, so it may accept all the headers while making HTTP response. Okay. Now app.get. What app.get does is it tells Fast API that the function right below it is in charge of handling requests that go to path slash using a get operation. So by at the rate is a decorator. What decorator does is it adds additional feature to your function. So we are telling app whenever there is a get request on this URL, it should trigger this function, and what this function does is it's returning a simple OK working string. Similarly, we have also made a post method. We are telling the app that whenever there is a post request on slash submit, this function should be triggered, and what this function is doing is it is accepting a parameter which is name in the form of string. And as I mentioned, we are importing a form, so it will take a form and it will give it to the name, and then we are returning it is in a JSON format. So name, and it will return a name. Okay, now let's check this application. I'll just turn on my virtual environment. It is specially recommended that you run your applications in Python applications in virtual environment. Then we'll type the command. So what is this command? Uvicon is a server where our application will be loaded. App is the instance name that we have defined here. So here is the app. So that's why we're writing their app. Then this app is the name of the file. So again we are writing :app. This is a flag. So hyphen means a flag. Reload. What reload does is whenever you change your code, the server will restart automatically. Then we are defining a port which is 8000. Now let's run it. Uvicon running on HTTP. So now it's running. We'll check it. You can see on port 8000 it is working. As I told, the get request is triggered whenever you hit a URL, and there's a slash. Even if you try slash, it will work. Okay. Now the interesting thing about Fast API is it gives you this documentation, so you can easily test your application without using any external application or software like Postman or Thunder Client. So let's check our get request again. Okay, response is okay working, and code 200 means it is a success code. Now we'll test our post method. Let's try it out. I'll write my name Swaroop. Execute. Now you can see, yeah, it is returning a JSON file with JSON format, which is name and my name. Okay, with a 200 code, success code. Okay, cool. So now we are done with building our application locally, and we have tested it in our local server. Now let's try dockerizing this. So as I mentioned, how do we dockerize our application? We write a Docker file for it. So let's write a Docker file. I've already written one. I'll explain again. Okay. So in a Docker file, we start by specifying our base image using the from keyword. So what we are telling Docker is, I am using Ubuntu's latest version as my base image. The next step is usually to write the commands of copying the files and installing the dependencies. First, we set a working directory and then copy all the files from our application. So here we are setting up our working directory, which is app. Then we'll update our OS using this apt get update. Then we'll install basic packages like Python 3 and Python 3 pip in order to run our application. Then we'll set up time zone, which is Asia Kolkata. Then after that, we'll copy our files from the local machine to the Docker image. So what dot does is it copies all the files in this present working directory to the app directory. Now we are installing dependencies. pip3 install -r requirements.txt. What -r does is it recursively installs all the packages mentioned in requirements.txt. What is requirements.txt? Requirements.txt includes all our Python modules required to run our application. So as I told you, you will need Uvicon, which is a server. Then you will need Fast API, which is Of course, we are making our application using Fast API. So yeah, so it will install all these packages. After that, the next thing we need to specify is the port number that needs to be exposed. Since our Fast API is going to run on on port 8000, that's why we'll indicate it here. What expose means? So whenever we run our application inside a container, the container's 8000 port will run our application, not our local machine's 8000 port, right? So in order to get access of that 8000 port, we need to expose that port from the container. So that's why we are writing expose 8000 port. And then finally, we'll run our application using this command, which is uvcon app instance name, file name, port, and host. Okay, now let's again test our Docker file and build an image. Okay, so to start with Docker, first we need some basic understanding of Linux commands. So like we'll need only three commands. We'll be using only three commands for Docker. First is pwd to get the present working directory. So I'm in this directory, and inside this all my project files are there. Then we'll use ls. Ls means list all the files and directories inside my parent working directory. So these are all my files present inside my localhost webinar directory. Then cd means change directory. So what we want to do is, we want to if you want to go inside a directory, we can use this cd command. We'll be using this command later on. Okay, now we'll start again with Docker. To build our image, we'll use Docker build -t. Then this will be our image name. You can use any image name. I'll be using localhost webinar. And this dot. What this dot means is, it will use all the files present in this parent working directory to build the image. Now it is building the image. So what we have done up till now, is we have tested our application locally. Then we tested it using the documentation. We tested get request, post request, and then we are trying to build a image for Docker. I have already built this image, so it will take lesser time for me, but it may take 5 to 10 minutes for your machine, because it will be generating the image from scratch. For me, it will take the cached version of my old image. Okay, now it's almost done. Okay, cool. Now we have generated an image. Now our next step is to run this image in a container. So for that, we'll use Docker run port. We'll specify a port which is 8000. What does this mean? As you know, we have exposed 8000 port from a container, so we have to link that port to our local machine's 8000 port. So for that, this is our local machine's 8000 port, and this is the container's 8000 port. We are linking it, and then the image name. Okay, I will run it. Again, our application is running. Let's check it once. The same URL should work now. Okay, there it is. So even now our application is still working. Let's see the docs documentation. Yeah, it's still working. So we don't need to check it again. Okay. So now we have successfully built the image and ran it inside the container. Okay. For Windows users, you need to install this Docker software in order to run all Docker applications. You can see our localhost webinar image is in use, and it is inside a container. Okay. Now we are done with setting up our Docker container in local machine. Now we'll deploy it on a hosting platform. We'll be using DigitalOcean as our hosting platform. DigitalOcean is a cloud infrastructure provider that provides cloud computing services to business entities. You may ask, why DigitalOcean? Well, DigitalOcean is the cheapest cloud hosting platform, and that's what matters, right? So one example for the new hosting plans is that you can get 1 GB of RAM, 25 GB SSD, one CPU core just for $5 per month. And this is affordable than any other web hosting platform offering similar services. This is what makes the company so appealing. So let's head to digitalocean.com. Okay. So you can create a DigitalOcean account using your credit. You can put your credit card details, and your account will be created, and you will be credited $100, and you can use it over 60 days of time, and it will be a free of cost. Also, if you have GitHub Student Pack, you can directly get $100 from your GitHub Student Pack using the DigitalOcean GitHub Student Pack account. So even that you can use. So your DigitalOcean account should look similar to this. You will find your username here. Then there are settings. You can manage your services from here, and it will show what services you're currently using. I'm using two Droplets. So for our today's session, we'll be using Droplets. What is Droplets? Droplet is a virtual private server. Virtual private server means it's similar to a VM, small VM, which has a dedicated storage and RAM. So let's create a droplet. You can create droplet. Okay. So here they'll ask some basic details like which is the basic image you want to load, which is Ubuntu. Then you will choose a basic plan. You can choose any plan according to your needs. I'll be using the basic plan, $5 per month. Then you can add some extra storages if you need more storage. You can choose the data center region where your server is located. I'll be using Indian. Then you can select additional options. No need. Okay, authentication. What is authentication? So whenever you want to access this server, you can access it by two ways, either using password or SSH key. Password is less secure than SSH key, so we'll be using SSH key. What is SSH key? SSH means secure shell. So if you are a Linux user, you want to access this server, then you can use SSH key. To generate your SSH key, you need to type SSH space keygen. So it will generate an SSH key, and you can paste it here along with your name and add it. What is its use? It can be used to access this server without using password. So I'll explain it when I'll be accessing this server. So please don't forget to include your SSH keys here. I'll be selecting both. And then you can change the name of the droplet. And then if you want to backup your code, you can backup it. And then finally you can create droplet. Okay, I have already created one, so I'll be using that. This is my droplet. So your droplet would look something like this. You can find your graphs like bandwidth, CPU usage here. This is your IP address. We'll be requiring this to access our server. 1 GB, we are getting 1 GB memory, 25 GB SSD, and our host OS is Ubuntu 20.04 LTS. Okay, now let's try to access this server from our terminal. So as I mentioned, for Linux, I'm in Windows, but you can use WSL to access a Linux terminal. So I'm using WSL. For Linux users, you can use SSH space the user you are trying to access the server. So I will be accessing using the root user. So root @ and then we'll type the IP address. IP address is here. Copy it, paste it. So now we are inside the server. So we have got the access, and now we are inside the server. If you are not using WSL, you are using only Windows, you can use PuTTY instead of that. So for PuTTY, you can just go on and see an online tutorial how to access a server using PuTTY. I'll be using SSH itself. Okay. Now again we'll see in which directory we are in. We are in root directory. Now we'll switch to home directory. Home. Then now there are three ways to get our code inside a server. So First is using FTP, which is file transfer protocol. Then there is GitHub or GitLab. So what is this? We can just push our code on GitHub and then pull here inside the server. So we'll be using GitHub. I've already pushed the code on GitHub in the CodeChef account. So I'll be just pulling the image using git clone. There's one more method to get your image inside a server, that is using Docker Hub. What is Docker Hub? Docker provides a Docker Hub which stores all your images and which can be pulled into any server. So if I'm a user, I can just create my image, I can push it into Docker Hub's registry, and then wherever I want to import that image, I can just pull the image wherever I want from Docker Hub. So as I mentioned, we'll be using GitHub. So I'll write git. For cloning a repository, we use git clone space the link of our GitHub code, which is this. I'll copy it and then I'll paste it. So for me, I've already cloned it once, so it says already exists, but for you it will clone all the repository and all the files inside it. Now I'll cd. So as I told, we'll be using cd to get inside our directory localhost. Now we'll see whether all our files are present or not. Yeah, we can see all our files. Mainly we are using app.py and docker file. This will be explained to you later on. Now again, we'll again build an image, run it inside a container, and let's see whether it's deployed or not. So again, before that, we need to update our base image, because there may be some bugs which are being solved after the host image is created. So for that, we'll use apt update. So it will update the image. There's a note: if you are not using a root user, then you need to specify sudo before apt. So for users which are not using root, for non-root users, you can use the command sudo apt update. Okay, now it's updated. Now as we are using Docker, we need to install Docker. So apt install Docker. I've already installed Docker, so for me it took less time. Now we have installed Docker. Let's build the image. Docker build -t, then image name is, I'll put app, and then dot to include all the files of this. So for me it took a fraction of a second, but for you it may take 5 to 10 minutes. Now let's check whether our image is generated or not. For that, we'll use Docker images. What it will do is, it will list all the images present inside the server's Docker. So as you can see, there are two images, which is Ubuntu, which is the base image, and app, which is just now we created. I had created it in the morning, so it is already created. Okay, now we'll build it. So for building, we'll use Docker build for running the container, we'll use Docker run. Then we'll specify the port as we did in the locally. We specified -p, which is flag, then port on which it should run on the server and on the local machine in the Docker. So 8000 colon 8000, and then image name. Image name is app. I just forgot to mention -t, and that's it. That's right. So again, our application is running. Now let's check again. So now we cannot use the same URL which we used before. If you remember, the URL link was 127.0.0.1 colon 8000. We can't use that. For now, to check our website, we need to use the IP address. So we'll copy it, paste it, colon 8000, because it is running on 8000 port. Again, our application is working. We'll check again the docs route documentation. Okay, it's working. Now you'll be wondering that our link, that we are mentioning a port, but normal website do not mention a port. So for that, we need to mention 80 port. Why 80 port? Because ideally what our server does is it shows anything that is running on port 80. So now there's nothing running on port 80, so it will not show anything. But now if we, as we have exposed 8000 port, we'll link it to a server's 80 port. So it will show what is there on 8000 port of the Docker. So let's use Docker run -p, and now we'll mention 80 port, 8000 app. So now you can see if I remove this 8000 port, it should still work. Yes, it's working. So now we are done with basic deployment. Now you can link this IP address to any domain name, and then when you will hit that domain, this link, this website will be loaded. You can just type in your browser right now to check whether this is working or not, because it is deployed. You can type 143.244.135.176. Okay. Now we are done with testing our project locally, deploying it, and then checking our project whether it's deployed correctly or not. So now we are done with basic deployment. Now Vishesh will explain you the security aspects of a web application and how do we write the YAML file, that is Docker Compose. Over to you, Vishesh.
Thank you, Swaroop. It was a wonderful explanation that you've given. Now, moving on, I'll be sharing my screen and presenting to you how to build a Docker Compose file. So before we jump into Docker Compose, let me just explain what Docker is. So, yeah. So Docker Compose is basically a tool that is used to run multi-container applications within one single file. So let's say you have a full stack application in which you have a front end different and a back end different. So by the normal conventional method, you'll have to build the file for the front end separately, then the back end separately, and then you'll have to run those separately. So this becomes a very tedious process when you're deploying a very large scale application, since you have to deploy all the services as microservices. So this process is eased with the help of Docker Compose. So Docker Compose, we just write one YAML file that configures our services, and then we can deploy it with one single solution. So Docker Compose is a very famous tool, and it is used in all environments, right from production staging to development as well as CI workflows. So moving on, in this module, I'll also be covering Traefik. So what Traefik is a reverse proxy which provides a gateway between the users and the internet. So a proxy server is a go-between, that intermediary server that forwards requests for content from multiple clients to different servers. So if, as you can see in the slide, we have one domain and then we have another second domain. So basically these are two routes, and according to the route, Traefik is a middleware which sits and defines what each route will do and points it to a different container altogether. Now, you might be wondering, why do we need a reverse proxy? So a reverse proxy basically sits behind the firewall in a private network. So it is not exposed to the global internet, and it provides an additional level of abstraction to control the smooth flow of network traffic between the clients and the servers. So the advantages of having a reverse proxy is that it helps in load balancing and also acceleration of services, since a lot of stuff is cached, and also it provides security and anonymity, because exposing ports like we've seen with we've done initially is a very dangerous process, and it is not at all considered a very secure practice. So what load balancing refers to is, it is efficiently distributing network data across a group of backend servers, also known as a server farm or a server pool. Then it acts as a traffic cop, basically sitting in front of the servers and distributing and routing requests to all the servers which are capable of handling those loads. So It also ensures that no server is compromised or overworked, and everything can be done to its max utilization with the best experience possible. So also, what it helps is if a single server goes down, let's say take the example of Netflix. So let's say if at one given point of time we have about 100 people watching a TV show which is not available. So like it will put a lot of load towards the server because it'll be streaming to 100 different people. So there's a very strong chance that that server might go down. So all of this is prevented by load balancing. Load balancing basically provides a distribution of all the loads across different servers. So all the servers are running the same instance for the timing, and this ensures that there's a performance. So in layman terms, let me explain this in terms of FFCS. So in VIT, we have a system called FFCS, which is first come first. So basically, you define your own timetable as well as teachers. So it might happen that there might be a demand for a lot of teachers. Sorry, like one subject, but there are less number of teachers. Because personally speaking, about 2 months back, we had FFCS, and the thing was, we had about five teachers for AOT, whereas the number of students registering were more than around 500, 600 people. So what it does is, so load balancer in this context is the management, since they decide to hire more teachers to teach that particular subject. And the number of requests in this case will be the number of students who are asking to study AOD. So the next thing that will be going on to is firewall. So what firewall is? Firewall is basically a network security device that monitors the incoming and outgoing traffic, and it permits or blocks the data packets according to a set of security rules that we define. So coming on to writing the Docker file, I've already written the Docker file for you, but I'll go through all the lines for you. So a Docker file has a very basic syntax, and if we go to the Docker compose, so we have this link called docs.docker.com and compose. So basically, this is a basic template which is for explaining Docker, and so it has to be written in a proper context. So for this case, we're using Python. So in terms of Python, so remember as we had in Swaroop session, we were exposing port 8000. So we build dot is similar to.
Sorry to disturb, Vishesh. Can you just zoom in the coding screen?
Sure.
Yeah.
Is this visible?
Yeah. Fine.
So coming to the Docker Compose file, Docker Compose is very simple to write. All you need to keep in mind is a list of indentation, which is basically similar to Python. So anyone who has written Python before will find very easy to write a Docker Compose file. So with Docker Compose file, we're specifying the Docker Compose version that this Docker supports. So right now we're using 3.7. And then we define a list of services. So basically all these services, like the services which are there, let's say we have to run a DB, and this is web which has to be run on the front end. So all of these have different Docker files which we've written over here. So if there is, let's say, a database file, we'll have another database a Docker file written over here that we can run. So according to, so then we specify the labels for our Docker file. So we set up middlewares. So and middlewares, we have added a parameter called rate limiting. So what basically rate limiting is, it limits the rate of requests to your server at any given point of time. This is done so that it prevents DOS, denial of services. So what DOS is basically, at any given point of time, let's say there are more number of requests than the server can handle. Let's say you have 100 rupees that you're willing to give to someone, and there are 1000 people to take. So obviously you can't distribute that 100 rupees to 1000 people, giving everyone 1 rupee individually. So what happens is, the 900 people won't get that 1 rupee, only the 100 will get that 1 rupee. To prevent such sorts of attacks, we use something which is known as rate limiting. So why traffic? So we have different reverse proxies, but traffic is one of the most preferred among them because just a second, I'll just open the documentation for easy reference. Yeah, so we have traffic proxy. Why do you use a traffic proxy? Because it is unlike other proxies like Nginx and other stuff. Traffic is very simple. So all you have to do is just install it, and it'll automatically handle all your requests. So you don't have to worry about setting up reverse proxies like Nginx, because this is very smart and it does by itself everything. So you don't have to do any work. Traffic does it all for you. And if you have to define some custom parameters, you can very easily define them using the labels which are there in the Docker Compose file. So we've set up a rate limiting which says on an average that we'll handle about 100 requests per minute, and then we'll have a burst of 50. So after 50, it won't really accept requests. Then we have to define the backend where we're deploying, for which instance are we deploying the traffic. So if you can see right now, we have used web. So that is why we have docker.network web. And on which port do we want traffic to listen? So that port is 8000 because in our Docker file, we'd mentioned 8000 as a port. So the other parameters that you have to do is depend on network. So if this is a web service, then you add this, and depends on, so basically defines the dependencies for the container to build properly. So let's say if traffic is somehow missing while building the Docker container, this won't execute. Then the next service that we will be building is traffic. So we have to define what traffic is. Right now we just told our Docker Compose that we need traffic, but what is traffic? So where do you find traffic? Where are you referencing it from? So you get all that references from the images which are built on Docker Hub. So the traffic community updates these images. So for this, we are using Traffic Alpine 1.7. And this is uploaded on Docker Hub. And what does restart mean? So let's say if somehow a service goes down for some reason, then it'll automatically restart itself. And what is the container name for this service? So the container name is traffic. Now, if you look at it, we have web over here, and we're referencing it as traffic. So we need to define that this container name is traffic, and it depends on traffic over here. Then on what all ports do we want traffic to route our request? So we have 8080, which stands for HTTP, and HTTPS, which is 443. And what are the volumes? So we have to define what volume is for the Docker container to pick up and bind it to the socket of Docker so that traffic can run very smoothly. So the default for this is /var/run docker.sock, and the internal container docker.sock. So basically it contains both the sockets. And then we have a configuration file which is known as traffic.toml, and it basically defines what all we're going to do with the request. So right now we have written a service that provides an automatic HTTPS certificate as well using Let's Encrypt. And last, we have a label. So we have to define the traffic port over here, on which port will traffic sit normally when it's building. And you might see just one more thing which is known as networks. And so we have to define that this is on a network. So we write networks web external is equal to true. So let me go to traffic.toml. So for traffic.toml, we have default entry point. So HTTP and HTTPS has been defined in the Docker Compose file as 80 and 443. And by default, what entry points 80, and what it'll do is, so whenever it sees any traffic coming to port 80, it will automatically redirect that HTTP traffic by converting it to an HTTPS request, and it will so it'll define the address for that HTTPS port, which in this case is 443, and it is establishing a secure TLS connection. That is why we've written entry points.http.tls. Then we have something known as ACME. So ACME is used to generate your certificates. So if you look at any website, for example, yeah. So over here we have a certificate. So if you see, we have the certificate issued to R3 and all of these, and the details of the certificate. So this is provided by a very popular service called Let's Encrypt. So it generates services for you. So the certificate is basically generated via this file. So moving on to Traffic, then we define our domain. So on which domain do we want? So if we are deploying it to a domain, let's say, so we'll define the root domain over here. So we have codechefvid.com, and the subdomain where it'll actually be deployed. So this is localhost.codechefvid.com, and then we'll define the Docker container and on which domain will it host. So we have localhost.codechefvid.com. So next, what we're going to do is, yeah. So I'm going to SSH into a container which I'd already made. So the container, basically the droplet is, I had made a droplet initially for demonstration, and the IP address for this is 139.59.43.40. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to SSH into it, and since I've generated a secure SSH key, so I have to enter my passphrase, which I'm going to do. So after which it authenticates me. Then we go to we type pwd to find the current working directory, and we're in root. So let's do cd/home, and we do ls, and we see that we have the folder localhost webinar, which is already cloned for you, and we do cd localhost webinar, and if you look at it, let me show all the files on this. So you see we have all the files which we add on the GitHub repository, and we have the Docker Compose file as well. So let's just see the Docker file. We have, if you look at it, it's the same Docker file that we were running. Yeah, so now we have to install Docker Compose. So how are we going to install Docker Compose? We'll install Compose using, so I'll be sharing the links with you in the chat. So this is the URL, docs.docker.com/compose/install. And what we have to do is we basically have to make a curl request to this, saying that we need to download Docker, and then we're going to execute it. So we did a curl request, and see we Docker Compose has been downloaded. Now then we do a chmod +x, saying that this is the default command that we're going to have, and let's just run this. And chmod basically change permissions, and +x means for root user. So execute this as a root user. Then we had downloaded the version 1.9.2. So let's see the version we had downloaded, Docker Compose version. See, we have the same version, which is 1.9.2, just with a different build image. Now what we're going to do is we're simply going to do a Docker Compose up. I'd already built the images, that is why it is deploying it for you. Otherwise it would have shown building the Docker file. So we have an error. So I'll show you what the error is. So yeah, localhost.codechefvid.com. we get a privacy issue. This is because Let's Encrypt recently changed the services, and it's not basically able to initialize a certificate for us. So nothing to worry about. Our service is still be working fine. So you see OK working, and it is there on localhost.coachfvit.com. So we have easily deployed it on one of our domains. Now, if you look at this, so if you look closely, I am going to change HTTPS to HTTP, and you'll see it'll automatically read out you to HTTPS. So you see, even though it's not secure, it automatically changed it to HTTP. Let me demonstrate it with a much greater clarity for you. So I'm going to close this tab and HTTP and localhost.coachfvit.com, and see, it redirected me to HTTPS, which means traffic is working perfectly. And if we check the logs, we see we get an HTTP request which says 200 OK. So 200 by default is the default success message that we get. So now that we've covered how to deploy using traffic on a domain, I'm going to cover the security aspects for this. So coming to networking, we initially are going to create a load balancer, and before that we'll be using. So I'm going to show you the public ports exposed for our VM currently. So if you can see this, I've added the host name, which is for the machine, and I just copy it, and I'll run the test for you once again. So, and let's say I do this thing, and I do a quick scan. This is called Nmap, and the GUI version of this is called ZenMap. And what ZenMap does is basically it is used as a tool to find all open services. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to perform a quick scan, and it's asking me for permissions. So yeah, I'm giving it the permissions. So it initializes scan, and we see these ports are exposed. So we have 22, which is by default the SSH port through which we're connecting through a VM. Then 80 is exposed. Then we see these ports are exposed, but you can't really. So we have to hide these ports, since if it's a big application, so we'll be deploying it on different containers, and this leaves us compromised. So next we have 443, which is our default HTTPS port, and we can see that 8000 is open. So to prevent these services, so if I go to I copy this IP address, and you see I just type 8000 in here, and I see I still can connect. So this port is exposed, and in a production level application, this can be very scary for us. So I'm just going to create a simple firewall. So I don't have any firewalls, so let me create a firewall. So let's say I name the firewall as localhost firewall, and inbound rules. So I'm going to allow traffic to come through very fixed ports. So I'm going to allow 80, 80, and 22 and 443 only. And let's say I block ICMP, or we leave it for now because ICMP is used for connecting. And then we add a droplet. So since our droplet name was test, we'll just add test over here. And we see we've created a successful firewall, and we have 6 rules, which were basically all the rules we defined. So we're allowing 3 ports for inbound and outbound. So if we run an Nmap test again, so yeah. So I think this is caching it from the previous tests. Yeah, so this is caching it basically from the previous tests. I'll just remove those. Yeah, so remove scan, remove. Another way of doing so is, by default, we have a service called UFW, which is by default the Linux firewall that we have. So let me just try it out over here. I think this shouldn't connect. This is connecting, which means we have a problem from a firewall. So we are going to restrict, we're going to edit this firewall, by removing this all TCP ports, and all traffic is blocked now. So let us just try again. It's still working. Anyways, I think we ran into an issue, so nothing to worry about. But this is basically how it's done. So now I'm gonna teach you how to build, how to deploy a load balancer. So it's very easy. So you just go to home and you see spin up a load balancer. So we have three different options which DigitalOcean provides us. So static websites and blogs with low to moderate traffic, which costs us $10 a month, and medium for $30 a month, and large for $60 a month, which is for big sites, for example, like I quoted Netflix. So then we choose the data region center, and then we add a VPC. So by default, we have already set up a VPC, which is known as default BLR1. And now what we do is we just add a droplet. So let it search. So we have two droplets, and then we had Ubuntu. Yeah, so we have two droplets, and the ports forwarding rules that we're going to set is port 80 to this port 80. So basically, if one requests come, like if this test VM is overloaded, this droplet, then it will forward this request to the Ubuntu droplet port 80. And then we have different algorithms. One of them is round robin, and the other one is least connections. So round robin takes one traffic one by one, and according to which it arrives. So we've studied about this in our university subjects known as operating system. And the other one is least connections. So whichever droplet will have the least number of connections, you can connect it over there. And then we have sticky session, which means by default we can pass a cookie. This is for stateful applications where you need the state. Let's say if you're using, so if your service, if you're deploying a movie service, then you need cookie because you need to find out that what the user was exactly watching, and then you can do it via cookie. Otherwise, if you have like a simple blogging service where you just have to show, you can do it via non-sticky session. And then we have the ports and everything set up, and we'll be checking the intervals. So basically it defines what all intervals are there. Now we can set up SSL, which redirects HTTP to HTTPS, and we can enable a proxy port protocol. And please note that the target droplets will require configuration to be compatible with the accepting proxy protocol. So basically we have to set up our proxy protocol, which is traffic, in such a way that it follows their connections. Otherwise this won't work. And do you want to keep the backend alive or not? So let's say if there is an issue, do I want that to keep that backend alive or after, let's say, the load has decreased, or do I kill it? So by default we don't check it, but in certain cases we do have to, so we have that option. And then we name this load balancer localhost. And the existing project, so right now we are in CodeChef project. So I'm going to create a load balancer. So we have an issue. HTTP to HTTPS redirection requires port forwarding rule with entry point on 443. So basically where we ran into an issue is we had enabled SSL. So let's just remove SSL since we already have it set up with a proxy. So we're going to create a load balancer, and boom, we're done. We don't have to do anything. Now it will automatically scale according to our services. So if we have, it'll automatically deploy more instances. So it's basically a one-click deployment solution. Now coming towards the end, we have something known as VPC. So what VPC is, VPC allows us to request or accept or deny connections according to our use cases. So let's say our services are hosted on the cloud, but the cloud is being used by by millions of people. So if you want to isolate your instance, let's say you're a big company and you have very important data in your backend, and you want to isolate it from the rest of the cloud, so that is where VPC kicks in. So what you'll be doing is you'll be creating a VPC, and you'll be setting up a VPC firewall. So each VPC will be having its own firewalls, and you'll be setting up gateways through which you can enter that VPC, which is completely done by the firewall. And using those exposed ports, people can connect via an authentication to your services which are running in the backend. So this is another additional layer of security. So combining all of these, VPC, firewall, reverse proxy, and load balancers, you can very easily deploy web services on the go, and you don't have to worry about anything since all of this is managed for you by DigitalOcean itself. So do we have any doubts? Am I audible?
Yeah, Vishesh.
So guys, how do you think about this session?
Please let us know in the chats.
Yeah. Drop an emoji in the chat, your favorite emoji. Wow. D_D writes crystal clear. Thank you. Rakshat writes no doubts, nice explanation. Thank you guys. What a lovely response. So I hope you found the session informative. If you have any doubts, you can drop them in the chat and we'll answer. So we are here for another 2 to 3 minutes. In case you have any doubts, feel free. So I guess we have no doubts and we can end the session. Thank you everyone. I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you, everyone.